Hi, welcome to Kitchen Chats. I am your host, Aimee Kandrac, and today I have the pleasure of inviting my friend Jenni Salisbury to join me. I am in my kitchen and she is in Denver, Colorado, where she currently resides and is the HR director in an international hospitality industry. And today we are going to discuss dealing with crisis when you are, how do you deal with it at work? Jenni, thanks so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure.
So Jenni, I like to ask all of my guests a question at the start, which is, do you have a moment that you're willing to share with our listeners, which was what we call a kitchen moment, sometime when you gathered in the kitchen and had to figure out some major life event?
I think about gathering in the kitchen is something that you do with friends and family. And I associate so many life memories with food that one that comes to mind, not necessarily a crisis moment, but growing up, my grandmother always made candy and cookies for people at Christmas time. And she would start in the fall. And she would make things and put them in tins and put them in the freezer. And as kids, we would go down there and we would sneak it like she did. No, she had no idea that we were down there taking all, when we were visiting. But what I think about that is the memory of that and the fact that the candy and cookies are given as gifts. And that's something that she did to show appreciation. And it's something that I do now to show appreciation, but also how to care for people when they're going through a hard time, or even for myself, because I can stress bake. So it works. I think it works out that way to care for people through food.
Oh, I love that. And I'm like giggling so much that you're like, oh, grandma doesn't know that we're sneaking all this candy. And she's probably like, I put it down there because I know you're going to sneak it all. And it just makes it even more fun and special for that. Or she would go down and say, I had a whole tin of candy and it's gone now. That's what a special memory. Thank you for sharing that with us. So Jenni, you have been in the HR industry and profession for a couple years now. What, maybe 20?
It's close to that. I'm on my 18th year right now.
Wow. Yeah. And you've had the opportunity to work in so many fun, exciting places all over the country, Hawaii, Portland, Denver, Indianapolis, all the fun spots.
Absolutely. And when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up, and I'm still trying to figure that out, I wanted a job where I could live wherever I wanted to live. And the hospitality industry allows you to do that. So I had an opportunity to work at Yellowstone National Park, Lake Tahoe, as you know, beautiful city of Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Denver is so nice that I've moved here twice. Hawaii, San Diego, San Francisco, Portland. And so picking an industry where I can live in the places that some other people just get to go on vacation has been a great opportunity. And then obviously we have, to be able to travel for fun and to enjoy the experience we provide for our guests, to enjoy it as a guest myself.
That is really nice, and what a great opportunity you have had to do that. And I can only assume that in all of these years and in all of these locations, you have seen probably all the different levels of personal crisis that your employees have experienced, right?
I think so. And then obviously 2020 to 2022 was a whole new experience of crisis that businesses had never gone through, HR professionals had never gone through. So we had to learn and adapt very quickly.
Yes. So you are well versed in all of that. What are some of the most common mistakes that employees do or have when they're experiencing something? So I have been an entrepreneur and not in full-time employment by someone else other than myself for a long time. So I have not had to deal with an HR director per se in many years. So I don't necessarily know the protocols, what do you do? How do you go about getting everything? What are the things that what's What's either the number one thing you should do and number one thing you shouldn't do when something's happened in your life going to your employer?
Well, I think that's a really great question. Something that you should do is talk to somebody, talk to someone at your workplace. So not every business is going to have designated HR or HR on site, but talking to your manager, your supervisor, to say, I've got something going on and I need help. So I think that's the most important thing. I think sometimes people panic, and because they don't know what to do, they might just, not come into work or not call in, or just, they're so caught up in the situation that they're dealing with that other things are just falling by the side. And if their employer doesn't know, it's hard for them to help.
So what kind of help would you expect your employer to have? Other than just like hopefully being nice and saying compassionate words.
Absolutely. I think there's two parts. I think there's the what you say and there's the what you do. So compassionate words, using your empathy to help someone who's maybe in a situation that you've never been through or you don't know much about. And the other part of that is the action. So is it, you have this kind of time off available to you. You have this type of paid time off available to you, or we can work on the schedule, or But if we don't have those conversations, it's hard to care for the person the way they need to be cared for in that stressful moment, usually, where work is just one thing that's on their plate in addition to friends, family, health, and any other things they might be balancing.
Right. So my coworkers are often really good friends of mine, right? And I think that in a lot of places of employment, you become friends with your coworkers, right? But there's got to be a little bit of a burden then on your coworkers when you're not there. And or if you are there, maybe you're not performing up to your usual. So what do you do when when you see something happening like with your coworker?
I think there's two things. If you have a good relationship with your coworker, to have that conversation. Are you okay? What's going on? How can I help you? I noticed that you're not, on your A game like you usually are. And again, if you have a good relationship, you could have those conversations. If you know your coworker well enough or you didn't feel comfortable, then maybe it's something that you take to your manager and your supervisor and just say, you know what, I've noticed this, and then let the manager or the supervisor, address it.
Okay. And that's okay to do?
It's okay to do. You should feel comfortable. I hope in most, work environments that you can go to a manager or supervisor that you trust and say, you know what, I'm worried about this, or our team isn't functioning the way that we normally function, or we need help in some respect. Yeah. If you've got a good relationship with your coworker, again, a lot of times people spend so much time with their coworkers, their friends, they're celebrating life events together, that it could be that it's the coworker who hears about the situation first, before the manager or supervisor or human resources or whoever knows that this colleague needs help.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's nice that they hopefully would have a situation where they can provide support like that. One thing that I've seen through What Friends Do before is where coworkers will kind of put together a meal sign up for people to bring in lunch for their coworker for the week. Like who's in charge of bringing, if everybody brings a sack lunch every day and eats together, someone will say, okay, I'm going to bring an extra portion of lunch for my friend this day. Like, and I can think of ways that I've seen on What Friends Do that you can support your coworkers, and even making an extra, batch of dinner so that your coworker can just leave and have dinner ready when they go home. But I don't know what other things you've done or seen that coworkers have done to support each other.
And a lot of it is, food seems to be a way that people like to support. Sometimes things like taking groceries to someone's house, or if there's, so you see a lot more of the like GoFundMe, where a coworker might share that with their other coworkers, or share about it on their personal social media, saying, you know what, my friend, needs help. Here's the link if you want to support. So it really, you see more of that. Obviously, I think in the last probably 5 or 6 years than you ever saw before. Things probably happen more informally, but
Mm-hmm.
with that particular technology, there's ways for people to raise money even from people that they don't even know.
Yeah, that is nice. And I've heard from some people as well that you can, in some organizations, donate your PTO or your extra sick days. I don't know how this works again, but I think sometimes you can gift that to another coworker, right?
Yes. So again, it depends on your company policy, and they might specify. They might say it's only vacation only, or and how what that transfer process looks like. But
Mm-hmm.
I have seen workplaces that do it. I mean, usually then there's just a an organized practice in place of how that's tracked and traced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that has to be helpful because if you do have something going on, and maybe FMLA doesn't cover enough, or your sick days aren't going to be enough to cover whatever's going on, that seems like it would be helpful. Are there any other things like that available to people?
It really depends on the situation. You've got more and more states that are um, rolling out some kind of portion of paid family leave. So, an example, California has a version of that. Oregon has a version of that. Colorado will actually have a version of that in 2024. And depending on the situation, so it may not cover every situation that someone's going through, but it will start, those programs start offering, financial resources to people when they're on leave, depending on the situation. Usually, obviously, those situations are tied more with, immediate family or your own personal health condition.
Mm-hmm.
But you're starting to see more of that. More and more employers also look at providing short-term disability, again, that or family bonding time, um, adoption assistance. So there's different benefits that companies are coming out with to recruit and retain and help care for people
Mm-hmm.
through all different kinds of life events. I think the other thing when people are addressing a situation like this is usually the time off and the pay are two separate things. Leave time, for example, covers the time away, but it may not cover any form of compensation. So that's, I think, something that when you're helping maybe you're talking to a friend or family member and you're encouraging them to go talk to their employer about a situation um, that they need, that hopefully they would explain that, but that time away, depending on the situation, depending on the benefits available, um, may or may not come with pay.
Okay. Okay. And so that's something, again, talk to your employer as soon as you can so that you can have an idea, even if you don't think you're going to need that, you don't know what might lie ahead. So talk to them. Because I know the times that I have sat through any kind of orientations and HR benefit things, and you're my friend, and I love that you are so well versed in this kind of stuff, but I tend to glaze over a little bit. So the details of these benefit packets, I'm like, I'm not going to need that. I don't need to know all of those details. I'll deal with it when the time comes, right? But when the time comes, it's even more important to sit down with you and your direct supervisor to talk about this.
Absolutely. And depending on the situation you're going through, you may or may not be wanting to share much in the way of details. It could be something
Mm-hmm.
very personal. And so it's also that, for a lot of scenarios, there's only certain information, especially when it comes to medical, that may even need to be provided. So kind of walking through, again, that process, with your employer. The other thing, like you mentioned, is that at the time that a major situation happens, is not the time where like, let me read through my colleague handbook. Let me go onto our portal and read up on this. And if they vaguely remember like that in orientation, someone said, oh, we have leave of absence options at the time of an emergency, it's not usually the first thing in mind. There's 27 things on your list, and that's
Mm-hmm.
probably 26.
Mm-hmm. And what if it's your spouse, right? So Brett does have we just got, the updated employee handbook portal link of all of the whatever, policies. But if something were to happen to him, I'm thinking now, I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, I know the names of everyone, and I probably could find in his phone contact information for his supervisor and stuff. But as a spouse, what would I do for his employer?
The contact would be helpful only to say, let's say if he was not in a place where he could make the phone call himself,
Mm-hmm.
that he making the phone call and saying, something has happened,
Mm-hmm.
and
I
he's
mean, I
going
can
to be
get in
able.
touch with him, but yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So, there's a lot of information that employers cannot normally provide to a spouse, a family member, because they're not the actual colleague. And benefit plans are a whole nother animal when it comes to that, because the same thing that
Right.
if you're, what information about a benefit plan can be provided if you're not covered under those benefits.
Right.
But someone who can at least start the process of, here's the, let's say, thinking about a medical situation, here's the medical leave forms, or here's the short-term disability, website to start a claim. What do you need? Because
Mm-hmm.
part of that conversation may not be just policies and procedures, but it may be, how are you doing? What can we do to support you and your family?
Mm-hmm.
So that you've got the human side of it, in addition to the, we need to make sure that things are covered on a benefit side or on a leave of absence side.
Right. And I'm really glad you brought the human side up as well, because again, I've always had the opportunity to, really work closely with my colleagues and employees and employers. So I've had that close human friendship relationship, where I felt comfortable sharing enough, um, so that we could support each other. And a lot of people have been able to, share enough, so that we could support employees and coworkers and things like that. And I just want to remind people, right? Your supervisors are human too. They care about you, and they also, they care about the bottom line too, but they want to make sure that you as the employee are well, and they want to be able to support you. What are things that you do to support your employees when something's going on?
The first thing in most scenarios is a conversation. It's the conversation of what's going on, what's on your mind, what do you think what do you think your next step is going to be, and then talking about what resources may be available. So is it something, talking about the fact that there's bereavement pay available because you have to go to a funeral? Is it offering your employee assistance program that has a certain number of complimentary counseling sessions? Is
Mm.
it, is it talking about other resources that may come through, let's say your health plan, like, telemedicine appointments with counselors or therapists? Is it, um, you know, is it as simple as letting someone just go home for the day? Someone be like,
Mhm.
what are you, you seem like you're going through a lot. Would you really be comfortable going back into your work area? Or do you think that maybe, you need to go home and to, collect yourself, focus on what's important, take care of your family.
Right.
So there's different options. Without some kind of communication or conversation, it's very hard to offer the next step or recommendations or resources.
Right. Well, and you're in the hospitality industry, so many of your employees and people who you work with are directly like providing service for clients and customers. And it's best for you, your brand even, right, to have employees who are happy and healthy. And so I'm trying to say in like a really nice way, it's good for both of you, and it's better for both of you if the employee can have the opportunity to go home, um, and get back to their A game, right?
I agree, because you think if you got a phone call or a text from a friend or a family member letting you know that something significant had happened, even if you go into a quiet place to collect yourself, you know you may be you may be crying, you may be breathing hard, you may be worried about what's happening or what's next. And, the ability to go to somebody and say, you know what, something happened, can I please go? Or even better, to have the person say, I can tell you're going through something. How can I help you? Do you want to step away? Do you want to take a longer lunch break? Do you want to try and get out early? Offering those, those suggestions can really go a long way for someone to feel that they're cared for.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And feeling that they're cared for, because this is where you spend so much of your life, is at work. So it's nice to create that environment. And I have to imagine, I've done some speaking engagements with large HR companies. And one of the things that I talk about with them a lot is the better you support your employees when they're going through something, the more likely they are to actually come back because they have connection with you, right?
You spend a lot of time with the people that you work with, and in many cases, those people have been with you through life events, through promotions, through transfers, through someone getting married, someone having their first child or grandchild, someone going through a divorce or a death in their family. So these are people who know you very well. You may be friends outside of work and do things together or support each other, when you're not at work. And so that connection, where you take your time away, whether it's 3 days or 3 months, and those people that care about you hopefully are reaching out, and they are saying, hey, we're thinking about you. And then when the time comes to return, that you're like, oh, I do want to go back, I do want to be around my team, the people who've got me, the people who've got my back. And so that's the environment that you would really want to create. And it's not one person who creates an environment like that.
Right.
Your leader may play a part in that, but the reality is, every single person on your team is the one creating that dynamic of, we know what, we care for each other, we got each other's back, or an environment maybe that isn't as friendly and welcoming, where you're like, I don't know, do I want to go back to that environment or not?
Okay, so that raises a really good point. I have not experienced this, so I'm like just talking about a scenario here, but I've heard from people that this happens. Somebody's gone for an extended period of time. You as the coworker now have to, pick up the slack. And there can be some resentment. There can be some like, oh, well, you've just been gone for 3 months. You might not know all of the details because you don't really need to, but then there's, again, it's like the resentment building up because the person's been gone and you've had to pick up for where they've been.
And I think that can come up in almost any scenario, even if you think about someone who just took a long vacation,
Yeah.
Like, oh, this person's in Bora Bora and I am now doing their work for 3 weeks. And I'm happy that they're on vacation. And I wish I was on vacation, instead of doing the work for 2 people. So there is that component of, it also, I think, depends on the work that you do. Is it something where, you can leave leave some helpful tips and tricks, or some kind of pass down for someone who's helping cover while you're away? Is it something where you don't take your work home with you, and so other people are just going to be scheduled to cover that shift or that project, and maybe there isn't as much of that pass on, or the feeling of I'm picking up for somebody else.
Right.
Everything to me always goes back to relationships, because it would also be, I'm doing it now, but I'm hoping that my team's going to do it for me down the road if I have a situation come up. That being a good person is being a good person, and that we want to I think put out what you want to get back. Think about the golden rule in that respect. That if I'm caring for you this week, then in return you're able to care for me next week.
I think that's a really nice reminder for everyone in most situations, but especially in the workplace situation, because somebody's gone and on vacation. Same thing, right? Gosh. So something that's going on right now, and not affecting your industry as much, but I'd love to hear your expert opinion on it. All of the layoffs that are happening, right? This is huge. It's affecting right now mostly the tech industry, but it's happening a lot of places. Layoffs are happening. How do you support your coworker who's just been laid off?
And that's something that I think a lot of people dealt with over the past 3 or 4 years.
Well, right, COVID especially, right.
COVID had a huge impact on that. And
Mhm.
it also think cyclically, as the economy goes up and down, you'll see that kind of come up again.
Mhm.
But a layoff is a major life situation, so it's
It
going to cause
is.
um, stress, anxiety, unknown that a car crash could cause, or an unexpected
Mhm.
family emergency that you didn't see coming. And
Right,
so you think about, it's a traumatic life event, just like other ones that may be more likely to come to mind.
right.
And so how do you care for a coworker when your situation is different than theirs? Um,
Mhm.
and how can you support them, whether it's recommending them to your network of friends and colleagues, maybe people in other industries. Is
Mm.
it just offering to like go out for coffee or go out for ice cream and hear them out, to be their
Mhm.
safe space to share what's on their mind. And then um,
And the human connection is still there, right? You can still have a friendship outside of work.
absolutely. And the work that you put into that relationship prior to, let's say, that situation happening, um, to still feel connected afterwards. And then you can also be their cheerleader. They get a new job, you're their biggest fan. You're going to
Right.
give them that congratulations, give them the shout out, wish them a happy first day, send them a card. Again, be their friend, and support them on to what's coming next.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really good and reminder. And I think often people don't put loss, like job loss, up there with some of those other major life events. And it really is just as big and often just as unexpected as cancer or a car crash or something like that. I mean, your whole life is about to change because you're not going to the same place every day. It's a really big thing.
It is, in any scenario that's taking you away from your circle and your routine. So whether
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a health emergency, whether it's you have to go out of town or out of state or out of country to care for a family member, that your circle, the people who care for you and encourage you, may not be there, may not be as close. Now you're trying to care for somebody long distance. You don't necessarily, you can't be like, hey, let's go to coffee tomorrow. It's more, hey, do you want to FaceTime, so that because you're 3 time zones away and you're in the
Right.
middle of a very challenging situation.
Right. Again, it comes down to those human connections.
It really is. And I think the human connection, whether it's work, friends, family, your church, anything like that, is what will carry you through to the other side of any major life challenge, because we spend so much of our time at work, and there's a lot of people who a lot of their how they define themselves is tied in with their job. That the situation that comes up that takes you away from your work, sometimes people feel like they've lost a part of themselves, a lot of some of their personality, how they identify, and how do you
Mm-hmm.
supporting people through that is really important.
It is. It is. Yeah, I'm thinking through lots of scenarios where I have not been a good friend um, when I've known someone who's been laid off, or because their company's downsized or something like that, and I just haven't reached out like I should have. I'm always happy to open my network to people and help them when they're the one who's making the change, right? When they're the one who's initiating it. But I think there's still some weirdness and stigma around oh my gosh, my company just downsized and I was one of the casualties. So we just
I
have
think
to
that
reach out to all of our friends, right? Work friends or not work friends when this is going on.
as like, yes, I mean, if you're thinking about if this happened to someone, a friend of mine outside of work, what would I do?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you would feel the same way about this as a friend inside of work.
Right.
And what would I do? I think the outreach piece is so important. I think early 2020 really taught us that like when you can't go to the places, when you can't meet with
Mm-hmm.
people in person, that it can become very isolating very quickly if you don't keep some kind of routine or connection. So last year I moved back to Colorado, and I have a lot of friends and connections here from when I lived here before, and obviously I love to eat and drink, and so we've gotten together for ice cream.
You
That
do.
we were having like hey, do you want to go for coffee? Do you want to go for breakfast? This year I'm keeping a list of like things I want to do in 2023, and one of them is 23 breakfast dates. So it's an opportunity for me to reach out to a friend and be like, hey, let's get together. And by the way, do you want to get breakfast? And that can be a way to, that's, if I have 23 breakfast dates with 23 different friends, that's a lot of opportunity to reach out, share, do something that's not part of our normal routine or friendship,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and be there for each other.
Right. Oh, I like that. And I think breakfast is one that with your work colleagues, especially, it would be really easy to implement. I mean, depending on, I'm not a morning person. So like if I need to be in at 7:30 and making breakfast before that, that's not really my jam. But
Maybe like a brunch, maybe like 9, 10, and
yeah.
something came out of a couple years ago where I worked. There was an ice cream shop right next to the colleague entry, and so one ice cream is one of my vices, but it lent itself to having what I would call ice cream department meetings, which is
Oh yeah.
meeting with a manager, meeting with my team, whatever else. But be like, rather than just let's meet in my office, be like, let's go outside, sit in the sunshine, and have
Mm-hmm.
ice cream, go get boba tea, or something like
Yeah.
that. And so now I think there's the place like for me where I'm just like, do we need to have an ice cream department meeting? Maybe we do.
Maybe we do. And if somebody can't join us, maybe we need to go drop off some ice cream for them so that they can join us another time.
Absolutely. And I will say, last year, I personally was going through some things that needed some time and attention. And so, something that someone who I work with did for me was send me an ice cream gift card. And they were just like, you know what? We know that this is something that you enjoy, and so please take care of yourself and please have some ice cream.
That is fantastic. Well, that leads me to one of my closing questions. But before I do that, are there any other last like tips, important things that you want to make sure employees or employers like always keep front of mind as they're going, is anyone's experiencing a crisis?
I think the biggest thing is that every person we interact with is a human being, and so how are we caring for another human being in our life?
Mm-hmm.
In workplaces, it can get very easy to get tied into this is our policy, this is our procedure. You're not eligible for this, but you are eligible for that. But thinking about how would I want this situation to go if a friend or family member was having this conversation with their employer or their
Mm-hmm.
colleague. Um, that we start with this is a human being, and I'm going to care for the human being that I'm having a conversation with. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that is a great reminder. Thank you for that. So as we wrap up, you kind of shared one of your one really nice thing that someone has done for you. But I'm wondering if first, what is your favorite thing to do for someone when they're experiencing any kind of life event or crisis? What's your go-to? I have some guesses.
Right. So something that one of them is fun greeting cards. So I have
Oh,
a huge collection of cards. And when I go to like festivals and makers markets and things like that, that's where I tend to buy them. So I'm not so much picking them up at, at a big box store. I'm usually, picking them locally for every occasion. So, a life event. I was talking to someone who just got recognized with a award at their work, and the next thing that I do, card goes in the mail. The front of the card says, "Do the thing," and so that it's a card that will fit that person in that moment.
mm-hmm.
Or a card that says, "I'm sorry, things are heavy," or "I wish I could be closer." So um, I feel like mail is a little bit underrated now because people are so used to texting. But at this point, really, most people don't want another text or another email. Most people don't get a lot of fun mail anymore. So cards and postcards are definitely something that I do to spread good vibes out to friends and family, whether it's to celebrate something fun, it's just thinking of you, or when someone's going through a significant, serious life event. So that's one thing I like
love,
to
I
stress.
love, I love that so much. And I have come to the realization really just in this past week that is like maybe the number one or number two thing that is mentioned on almost every episode of this podcast. People say, I love a handwritten note. I love to send a handwritten note. It's just so personal and meaningful. And now I think I am, and I like to send a handwritten note also. And I can't wait to take that tip of picking up, because I love to go to the First Fridays and all the makers markets and all of the fairs and art fairs and look for those really fun and interesting cards. Ooh, yay. I can't wait for that one. Thanks.
It's really enjoyable. And, extra bonus, you're supporting a local small.
Exactly.
So same thing, if you're in a fun little boutique, and again, they're carrying cards from different places, if I
Mhm.
find that I like, then I'll go to that person's website after I buy a couple at the store. But if I know that I like that card style, then
Mhm.
I'll just go to the maker directly and order some from them. And I will say, when you order, especially like cards from small businesses, almost always I get a handwritten note in the
Oh,
package with the cards that I ordered that are just like, be like, "Dear Jenni, thank you so much for ordering again," or that, maybe they put something in there, they put a sticker, they put another card, something like that. So that's a win all the way around.
oh, this makes me really excited. I mean, I've loved our whole conversation, but this is a really fun point of it as well. So last question, and that is, what is the top thing that comes to mind that anyone has done for you when you've been going through something?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is the question of like, what do you need, or do you need time?
Mm.
Because time is the finite resource. And so if someone is saying, take the time to take care of your family member, take care of your health. Let me, what, you need to get out of here. Let me take care of this project, this presentation, this conversation. Let me cover your volunteer shift, whatever it happens to be. But when you're going through something, the willingness to listen and the willingness to either give of your time or help give them more time.
I love that. Help give them more time. Jenni, this has been really wonderful and so many important conversations. Thank you for taking your time to sit with me today. And I love the human connection that you and I have had the opportunity to continue after all of these years. And your expertise is really appreciated today. Thanks.
It was a lot of fun to sit at this counter with you, and I look forward to the next time that we're sitting at an ice cream counter together.
Oh, I will make that happen soon. Don't worry.
I
Thanks.
can't